behavioral avoidance is a strategy that we all use. If we're honest with ourselves, we all engage in some form of behavioral avoidance. And behavioral avoidance really refers to strategies I use that requires me to engage in certain behaviors that is really aimed at making emotions go away. So it's something that I do as a way to try to feel better, but the irony is that it backfires and makes me feel worse. So anything that I do that is a strategy to try to get some temporary relief from strong emotions is what we would refer to as behavioral avoidance, like not going to places. There's 5 ways we avoid emotional experience through behavior. So one way we avoid through behavioral avoidance is what we call overt avoidance, what I like to call AKA I'm not going. So it's kind of like saying, if someone says, hey, there's this gathering, there's this get together at this place, nope, not going. Or, oh, there's a lot of people at this mall, nope, not going. So no means no. So overt avoidance is I am not going, right? No is no. It's something I'm simply not doing, period. So there's no smoke and mirrors whatsoever. A second type of behavioral avoidance, which is much more subtle, is what we call subtle behavioral avoidance. And subtle behavioral avoidance is what I like to tell people, I'm there, but I'm not all the way there. So here's some common examples of subtle behavioral avoidance. It's like saying, oh yeah, the family's at my house, but I'm gonna sit in the theater room by myself, right? Or I'm going to the social gathering, but I'm only gonna speak to familiar people. Or I'm gonna order my food, but I'm not gonna make eye contact. Or I'm going to the movie theater, but I'm gonna sit on the aisle seat just in case something happens, right? So it's this idea that I'm gonna go if you go with me, right? So I'm going to these situations, but I'm subtly avoiding the full intensity of an emotional experience. So that's what we call subtle behavioral avoidance, right? Only talking to people I'm comfortable with, for example. Another form of behavioral avoidance is what we call cognitive avoidance, AKA thought suppression. It's like saying, I'm gonna try everything I can to not think about that. It's like, block out this thought. I put my fingers in my ears to distract myself. I change the TV channel. I might use music as a way of distraction. Worry actually is a form of cognitive avoidance, because what I'm avoiding with worry is really like the emotional experience that's associated with it and a feared outcome. So I'm trying to problem solve, in the case of worry, something that has a very unlikely likelihood of occurring anyway. So it's like saying, though, here's the problem with that. The problem with that type of avoidance is saying, you know, if I told you to think about anything you want for the next 60 seconds, but you cannot think of a polar bear, don't do it, not even once. Ready, go. We inevitably think of a polar bear. So the point of cognitive avoidance or thought suppression is that it might seem like a good idea to give me some relief from an emotion, but it doesn't work because it makes me think of the thing I don't want to think about. So a fourth type of behavioral avoidance is what we call a safety signal. This is what I like to refer to as Linus's blanket from Charlie Brown and Peanuts. So it's like something I have to carry with me or have on me at all times that makes me feel better, right? But it only works temporarily. So it's kind of like saying, oh, I have this rabbit's foot in my pocket, but I can cross the bridge if I have it in my pocket. Like I'll be fine, right? Or I have to have someone with me when I go certain places. Or I don't have asthma, but that one time I had an asthma attack, so therefore I have to carry this inhaler on vacation just in case, right? So it's this idea that I keep something with me to feel better. But again, all these strategies backfire, make me feel worse. And then finally, the last type of behavioral avoidance is what we call an emotion-driven behavior, or what we like to call an EDB. And that's basically saying it's something I do in an overreaction to an emotional experience. It's like saying, if I'm having panic symptoms in Target, I would flee or escape right away. Or if I feel really sad or depressed, I might isolate myself for extended period of time. Or if I get angry, I might hurl insults on purpose so you can feel my pain. It's like this overt behavior. So it's kind of the opposite of overt avoidance, whereas overt avoidance is like, no, I'm not going. And emotion behavior is on the other end of the continuum. And it's like saying, oh, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do something that you're going to observe and see. If you think about how avoidance operates, the whole point of avoidance is that it gives me a sense of temporary relief, but not sometimes, but always, it always backfires and perpetuates strong emotions. So when you think about an athlete and their well-being and their performance, Avoidance only serves the function of making me feel better or confident temporarily. So the first piece is recognizing that avoidance always makes emotions more intense. So once I have that revelation, the second most important piece is to start identifying what I call alternative actions, are also known as incompatible behaviors. So alternative actions and incompatible behaviors. What is something that allows me to fully experience certain emotions that then I can recognize what I like to refer to as the emotional law of gravity? What goes up must come down. So the emotional law of gravity means what goes up must come down. In other words, emotions run a natural course. If I'm in a situation with a coach, in a game situation, at practice, if I'm put on the spot in class, whatever it might be, whatever situation I might face as an athlete, I have to recognize that there's always an ebb and flow with emotional experiences. Avoidance never allows me to experience that, though, and my body's natural reaction to that. So in other words, what happens is that if I engage in an incompatible behavior, like for instance, if it's, oh, I don't want to talk to my coach because he's going to be mad at me, so I avoid talking to him about playing time. That's a good example, I think. So if I confront that situation and make the decision to talk to coach after practice, my anxiety is probably going to go all the way up to a peak. But what happens naturally if I don't escape is that it's going to level off like that, and then it's going to drop on its own. What happens? My anxiety goes down. I feel more self-confident, and there's positive consequences more than likely because my coach now knows that I can approach him or her with a certain problem or situation. And now there's an open dialogue and communication. So ultimately, engaging in an alternative action, in other words, confronting the emotion, always leads to me feeling better, not only with my self-confidence, but also about me being able to manage emotions more effectively long-term, which builds skills as an athlete, not only as an athlete during my performances, but way after I'm done with my sport.